So welcome to the summer edition of Global View. Today we have a special guest directly from Los Angeles. His name is BASIL MOORE and is a filmmaker, writer, producer, independent researcher, author of Flux and Flow, a very popular science book exploring fundamental questions about change and the natural world. His work spans the intersection of history, science, culture, politics, and human behavior. Having studied multiple global cultures, speaking 5 languages, and researched world, religious, and the complex relationship between religion and political power, he brings a distinct cross-cultural and system-oriented perspective to contemporary geopolitical questions. That perspective has long informed his filmmaking. His first film, The Sea Gate, explored how children from different cultures and socio-political backgrounds can ultimately be affected directly or indirectly by the same war. His continuing work, including the historical feature Einstein and independent scientific research, reflects a broader commitment to understanding the forces, ideas, and human consequences that shape history. Welcome to the show. This is quite impressive resume, Basil.
Thank you, Simona. Thank you, George, for having me on your amazing show. I've been watching it for now quite some time, and I'm proud of you guys for what you've done and what you're standing for. So I'm proud to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you.
Well, today, Basil Moore joins us to examine a provocative question. Are the world's major geopolitical crises still separate events, or are they becoming parts of one increasingly interconnected system? I would start just from this.
Thank you, Simona, for the question. It's an important question because what's happened is that there are multiple scenarios, multiple stages, theatrical stages, as it were, happening simultaneously for the first time in a very long time. And they're all major events and they're all interconnected. What we're seeing geopolitically is not one global war, but several conflicts becoming increasingly interconnected. Russia and Ukraine remain locked in an attritional war while NATO strengthens its eastern frontier. So in the Middle East, we have Iran and Israel, of course, and the United States. They have crossed thresholds over the last few months that previously kept their confrontation largely indirect. But now Gulf states are reconsidering their security, while Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan have moved towards a new collective defense structure. Meanwhile, China and North Korea affect the strategic calculations of Russia, Iran, and the United States in very different ways. Now, the important point is that these theaters compete for many of the same resources: missiles, weapons, interceptors, intelligence, ships, energy, and control over Hormuz, and control over the resources of the world, and political attention. So a development in one region, in one of those areas, increasingly changes the strategic equation somewhere else. That's the central feature of the world we're looking at the moment. Separate geopolitical systems are becoming completely coupled.
So you mentioned these disparate conflicts, but some are arguing recently that Ukraine, for example, is attempting to attack Iran to suck Iran into the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Do you see that as happening? And if yes, what are the consequences for that unlikely or likely scenario?
Well, first, let's look at the historical connection, and the reason why I would like to call it a rumor is circulating at the moment, because they all started as a rumor until it actually manifests in reality and then it becomes real. So during the first year or the beginning of the second year of the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia called Iran for aid, and Iranian drones have crossed the entire Middle East over the Mediterranean and crossed over to Russia, to Ukraine, to actually target targets in Ukraine. And so that demonstrated for Russia and for Ukraine the capabilities of Iran. And obviously, what I've just mentioned is that all of the fronts, all of the war conflicts are interconnected. Russia is aiding Iran in some indirect manner. China is involved in some manner. Pakistan is in negotiations, trying to broker deals between the Iranians and the Americans. At the same time, Oman is involved, trying to broker the deal. So they're all interconnected. Now, the problem is this, is that now Iran will never engage Ukraine unless Russia explicitly, first of all, gives them permission, or they run out of missiles or long-range drones, which I don't see in the foreseeable future. So even if Ukraine itself decides to send long-range missiles or drones to Iran on behalf of the West, I don't see that Iran would retaliate or respond to that. It would be probably Russia.
But, I followed some of your work, and you also have been looking at historical Sunni Shia divide, and specifically Saudi Arabia's Shia minority. How does that history relate to the modern Iran-Saudi relationship, and what potential internal vulnerabilities do you see in regional tensions continue to escalate?
Interestingly, just to answer, thank you for that question. Interestingly, to answer that question accurately, I will just recap a really quick historical fact about the Shia and Sunni. The conflict goes back to the year 600, and basically the Khalifa, the Muslim Khalifa, which means the succession system, were divided between whether it would be part of the bloodline or part of selected, respected elders or leaders. And at some point, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, which is the one of the caliphs, one of the first caliphs, was followed by a certain faction of Islam. And Ali, which was assassinated by a different, again, third faction, has become a symbol for the Shia to follow. And what's interesting is that, generally speaking, so just to be very clear, the Shia and the Sunni Muslims, they more or less support each other until they face each other. Now, there's about 6 million Shia that lives in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is mostly Sunni, and most of Iran is mostly Shia. And interestingly, the percentages of the Shia population in Saudi Arabia are pretty much in military age. They're predominantly peaceful and have been under control, under the king and the royal family control for many years. However, with the recent events and the recent developments in the region, and how Iran have demonstrated that they are not anymore, they're no longer loyal to the Islamic cohesion, which is that all Muslims should stand together. They have launched attacks onto the Saudi infrastructure, which destroyed pretty much somewhere between, the official number is 10%, but my perception of what's happening is about 20% of the infrastructure of the oil production of Saudi Arabia. It's almost 700,000 barrels is the official number, but it's closer to 1.3 to 1.4 million barrels per day of lesser production than prior to the war with Iran. That infrastructure is significant for Saudi Arabia. It's not significant on the world scale, but it's significant from Saudi Arabia and for its economy. Saudi Arabia chose to reach out to Turkey and Pakistan for protection treaty that would allow Saudi Arabia to be protected by a NATO member. So any attack on Saudi Arabia in the future will actually invoke Article 5 of NATO, which will create an immediate response from NATO. So Iran will have to think twice now if they were to attack Saudi Arabia. Again, this is just one part of it, but historically speaking, the Middle East contains another layer that predates modern geopolitics by almost 14 centuries. The Sunni Shia division, it originated with a dispute over succession after Muhammad and deepened dramatically after the killing of Hussein at Karbala in Iraq. But modern Saudi-Iranian competition cannot simply be explained as a religious conflict. Saudi Arabia is predominantly Sunni, yet roughly 10 to 15% of the citizens are estimated to be Shia, concentrated particularly in the strategically important Eastern province. This creates an interesting theoretical question. If Iran wanted to circumvent Saudi Arabia's strengthening external defense relationships that we've just discussed, could internal instability become more strategically useful than direct attack, which means Iran could indirectly activate the internal Shia population against Saudi Arabia, which will cause an enormous instability to the oil production, to the economy, to the energy of the entire world and the region, which will undermine Israel's control and the United States and the West, including European Union's control over the regions and controlling the energy. This is a huge potential that I'm predicting that something like that will happen within the next month or two.
What's your prediction exactly? Sorry to interrupt you here. What is your prediction?
That Iran will activate the Shia loyalist population within Saudi Arabia. If Iran wanted to circumvent Saudi Arabia's strengthening external defense relationships, which is the treaty that they just signed with Turkey and Pakistan, then this is very easy for them to activate the Shia population, which is a military age population inside Saudi Arabia. That does not imply Saudi Shia would operate or cooperate under Iranian control immediately, but it's a loyalist relationship. They're being activated from a cultural standpoint rather than from a political standpoint. The hypothesis is about vulnerability. The vulnerability within Saudi Arabia exists now more than ever, that the Shia population could be activated and cause a serious imbalance in the world energy and the internal political stability of Saudi Arabia and the entire region of the Gulf. If domestic unrest in Saudi Arabia and external military pressure and threats to energy infrastructure occurred simultaneously, if all these things happen at the same time, Saudi Arabia could face several different forms of pressure at once, with consequences extending into the UAE, Yemen, Hormuz, and the wider Gulf.
Well, we've seen Yemen and the Houthis basically at war with Saudi, and the Houthis are a proxy of Iran in a country that neighbors Saudi Arabia and controls a major choke point that is now under basically, this is contested, similarly to the way that the Strait of Hormuz has been. So do you see Yemen and the Houthis involved in this prospective scenario in which there is domestic discord within Saudi Arabia, or do you think that the Houthis now have decided not to escalate things?
I think in as far as activation of Yemen in the geopolitical relationships currently occurring in the region, it will be very difficult for them to decide to meddle into the current situation, because it would complicate everything and it probably would trigger a swift response against Yemen immediately. And they know that. This is beyond smaller desires to cause instability in the region. This is a big geopolitical ramifications, and they understand that. So I doubt very much that they would engage in any way or shape or form at this stage until at least the Iran, United States, and Israel situation has subsided a great deal.
Where do you think the United States is at in this geopolitical conflicts where all these wars, according to your views, are interconnected? What do you expect to be next move from United States?
I cannot know for sure what the United States is going to do, but there is a pickle the United States has put itself in. It's undoubtedly an extremely difficult situation that the administration have found themselves in, specifically after the increased leadership threats that are occurring almost on an hourly basis now. We've heard, of course, about Trump escaping in a catering truck and not using his Air Force One to transfer to his airplane in another military base. That is just one incident that we've heard about, and that happened in July. We've just heard about it here, August 8th or something like that. But this is just one incident. The increased pressure on the United States administration today will cause the geopolitical negotiations to be a lot more tamed and less risky than the initial steps that were taken with Israel when the attack on Iran took place. And there's another big problem. The United States did not calculate the scope of the Iran conflict. They were not
What do you mean exactly? They did not calculate. Do you think they underestimated Iran?
They didn't underestimate Iran. They underestimated their own stockpile. That means the United States is providing aid, military aid, to its allies, including Ukraine, including many NATO allies. And there isn't enough weapons. The factories in the United States are not able to keep up with the demand on the ammunition. The stockpiles have reduced a great deal. There is an incredible amount of ammunition that was used in the Iran-Israeli United States conflict that was not anticipated in those numbers. And these numbers have caused a serious strategic fallback, which means the United States has to ration ammunitions for their own protections, for their own national security now, and not supply the scheduled, agreed upon ammunitions to allies, our allies in the world. So there is a serious logistical issue that the United States, the administration is facing at the moment, and they're going to be very difficult decisions for the United States to be able to navigate the next phase with the Iran conflict. They unfortunately, that situation is causing Iran to be much more difficult negotiator.
What is China and Russia and North Korea and Iran's relationship? Some would say that there's this new bloc emerging, part of this new BRICS movement that's now morphing into more of a security type of network. Do you think that's a plausible explanation for the relationship that's growing between these countries, or do you think that Iran is basically left on its own? Basically, the question is, what is Iran's role in this new emerging bloc in the Middle East and Eurasia and even the South China Sea?
Well, I mean, it's not a secret that Russia and China and North Korea have been collaborating for many years. Politically, they've been aligned. Militarily, they've been aligned for many years. It's not a secret. A few months ago, when the Ukrainian front has become intensified, it basically created an issue for the Russians to maintain military control over the Iranian airspace because they have a protection treaty between them. And they had to remove a lot of the protection from that region, and which allowed Israel and the United States to take advantage of that situation and initiate the attacks on Iran. Now, it's not a secret that Russia has been helping Iran. It's not official, but it's not a secret that Russia have supplied intelligence to Iran to identify vulnerabilities in the United States military, including the military bases in the Middle East, which allowed Iran to target. So North Korea have supplied components for the long-range missiles that Iran is manufacturing. North Korea and Russia and China have been supplying components. It's not a secret.
Yeah, about that, there have been recently warnings that advances in Russian naval missiles capabilities could place UK under greater pressure, while Russia and NATO are simultaneously strengthening their positions around Northern and Eastern Europe. What has actually changed, and why should the UK and the rest of NATO be concerned?
This is actually, thank you for that question. It's a very important question because it's very current. Today is August 14th, 2026, and literally 48 hours ago, Britain have announced that the Russian military naval activities have increased tremendously around the UK Isles. Now, Russia has been added to the UAE, Yemen, and the Hormuz conflicts by increasing its reach militarily from ships, which is, by the way, there's a treaty in place preventing warships to have specific types of long-range missiles to be launched towards capital targets, capitals of countries, especially in the EU and United Kingdom. So now Russia has initiated this 48 hours ago. Britain has recently confronted a really uncomfortable reality now. They're having to reshift their military resources to be able to defend their own country, as opposed to they're having to recall a lot of their resources from the Middle East and the Mediterranean. The capabilities of the Russian naval platforms have increased exponentially. In fact, it can now potentially carry long-range weapons capable of threatening British territory from relatively nearby waters. London has, of course, been within range of Russia or Russian strategic weapons for decades, but that's from Russia. But now there is no time for interception because the distance between the launch and the target has decreased exponentially by having these warships, relatively speaking, very close to London. So what's changing is the possibility of mobile naval platforms approaching Britain with sophisticated conventional missiles, potentially compressing warning times and forcing the Royal Navy and NATO to dedicate resources to tracking them. This is an issue because these resources were attributed in different regions to maintain control and safety and security in different areas. At the same time now, Russia continues rebuilding military capabilities around NATO's northeastern frontier, while NATO strengthens defenses in Finland and the Baltic states. That creates a classical security dilemma. NATO says it is responding defensively to Russia. Russia interprets NATO's buildup as a threat and responds with additional capability. Neither side necessarily has to want a direct war for the system itself to become progressively more dangerous.
Speaking about predictions, how do you see the conflict ending between Russia and Ukraine? And how do you see the conflict ending between the United States and Iran?
Great question.
It's a fantastic question. And since they're interconnected, the answer is a complex systems mathematical answer rather than a political answer. The probabilities of Ukraine maintaining the war with Russia is not probable under the current circumstances. So Ukraine is almost entirely dependent on the EU and the West for support and for continuing the resistance against Russia. The West has been bleeding dry. Italy has been trying to remove itself from the conflict. So has France and Germany and various other European Union countries. The only country that is maintaining its position is the UK. And the UK now, with the new situation with Russia and how the naval ships are circulating the Isle very closely and shortening the distance between the missile ranges to reach London very quickly, which shortens the time to respond, is causing the UK to rethink its strategy in its support to Ukraine. So my immediate gut feeling is that Ukraine and Russia will eventually reach a treaty with the help of a country like China and perhaps one of the Scandinavian countries getting involved, like Norway, in mediation. Not likely the United States, in my view, at the moment, but possibly another country, I don't know. But it's not likely to be sustained anymore. Ukraine is greatly affected economically and militarily. So that's Ukraine. For Iran and the United States situation, it is has become very dangerous. And like I said earlier, that the leadership threats has increased exponentially. It's almost on an hourly basis now, and it's just they don't have to do anything to continue putting pressure, applying pressure on the security of the administration to create this instability, and that instability would lead to eventual leniency in the negotiation tactics between the United States and Iran, which they would reach some compromised negotiation. Now, one of the point of contention between Iran and the United States negotiations wasn't necessarily the nuclear proliferation or nuclear compliance with the rest of the nuclear countries. It was oil and oil production and distribution. They wanted Aramco to welcome Iran. Iran doesn't want to welcome Aramco into its fold. So that issue is going to continue being a problem for the world energy and for supplying adversary countries with energy against United States alliance. So that is going to be a point that probably will end up continuing and won't be part of the negotiation points between the United States and Iran, and that's probably how the negotiations will end. Because at the moment, the point of contention was that Iran refused systematically to include the oil production and energy regulated by the West in any way or shape or form.
Thank you very much, Basil. I would like to not take much of your time and leave you with one last question. I was really much, my attention was caught by your interpretation of all these conflicts being somehow interconnected. Now, we're talking about different geopolitical crises. Being interconnected, my last question is, where this trajectory will intersect, if they will ever intersect?
Repeat the question.
You mentioned that all these conflicts are interconnected, right? But they're still different geopolitical issues. Now, if you see an interconnection between those, when and at which point these geopolitical different situations will cross their trajectories?
Oh, I see. Well, this is where all these lines begin to intersect. America has commitments in Europe, the Middle East, and Indo-Pacific, but missiles, ships, and industrial production are limited, finite. Russia can force NATO to devote resources to Europe and British homeland defense without attacking Britain at all. This is what Russia is aiming to do by threatening British sovereignty with warships with long-range missiles from just the southern or northeastern shores of Britain. Middle Eastern conflict consumes additional American air defense capacity and attention. Disruption around Hormuz can affect global energy prices without anybody attacking Europe directly. China can benefit strategically from American overextension.
You're talking about proxy wars.
It's proxy wars and forcing the energy and the military resources to be diverted to defense rather than offense. That's the strategy that China, Russia, and Northern Korea and Iran are resorting to at the moment. So China can benefit strategically from American overextension without entering either conflict. Meanwhile, assassination threats, proxy activity, internal instability, and regional alliance create additional variables that conventional military calculations don't capture. So my hypothesis for the immediate future isn't that a global war is inevitable. It's that the system is becoming increasingly sensitive to synchronization.
We are already living this global war.
Exactly. The real danger
have replaced weapons.
Exactly. And the real danger also may arise when several individually manageable problems occur at once, simultaneously, forcing governments to make decisions under conditions they never expected to face simultaneously. That's the exact issue that I'm having with the war with Iran. The United States did not calculate enough domino effects down the line. They thought they were able to end that war like Venezuela, 2-3 days, 24 hours, capture the necessary people. After killing the leaders of Iran and eliminating all the major defense military personnel, Iran is in exactly the same place and worse against the United States than it's ever been before. So again, my hypothesis is that the real danger will come out of several individual manageable problems. These manageable problems will become unmanageable. And that's how the danger will increase. And that danger is basically when you're fighting multiple small wars all at once, which is addressing the leadership threats, the Hormuz issue, the Ukraine issue, the British sovereignty and the Russian warships issue all at once. And now there's a military buildup as well on the borders of Lithuania from Russia, which is again causing the NATO and the EU to recalculate and recalibrate its resources in the event that something could occur at that border. So Russia is playing a game that's extremely strategic and extremely dangerous, but the strategy is to completely disperse the resources of NATO and the EU and the United States, militarily and economically, and energy, from the energy sector as well.
Very interesting. I have one last question. It's about the overall systemic changes that you see potentially. Nature abhors a vacuum the way that geopolitics obviously abhors a vacuum. When one system is dismantled, a new system eventually comes and replaces it. We've seen that after the end of World War II. We saw that throughout the Cold War. and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, we have various conflicts now that we've been discussing here today with you, from Russia to Ukraine to Iran, the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, potentially part of this. Do you see a systemic, I should say, change coming globally after these wars end? Or do you see small, slight configurations in how oil might be traded in parts of the world, how some countries might, collaborate politically and militarily? Do you see that, or do you see systemic changes coming once these wars are over? What's the big picture? Because I know really that's what our viewers are very curious in trying to understand.
The geopolitical landscape from an economic point of view is predominantly controlled and affected and influenced by the United States economy. Once the United States economy decides to decouple from certain economical alliances, it would topple the evaluations of certain economies that would result in the reconfiguration of the geopolitical and the geosocial and socioeconomic structures throughout the world. That could cause an instability from a military perspective, would cause different directives to be redirected, the prime directives of certain countries. For example, Great Britain, the UK, has not calculated back in 2024. They never anticipated that Trump would remove a lot of the military support. They're having to redirect resources from social benefits into military spending. Similar things are happening in Germany. That's just the tip of the iceberg. But what we're seeing right now is that a major issue could occur that would allow Taiwan to fall into the hands of the Chinese, for example. This could lead to an incredibly unpredictable shift in technocracy. At the moment, the United States leads the world in that sector. That could change. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, IBM, and OpenAI, and all the emerging AI industry is currently in the United States because of the manufacturing supplies. If that is affected in any way or shape or form, the corporations have no reason to stay in the United States. They're not loyal to a nation. That would affect not only the economy, but the strategic, systematic strategies that the United States have been building and developing for the past decade to position itself as a world power.
Well, that was absolutely a fascinating conversation, and I would like you to share with our audience where they can find you, where they can follow your work, and ultimately, if you can predict any film inspired by the current geopolitical events you are working on.
Absolutely. Follow me on Basil Moore Films on Instagram. BasilMoore.com is a under construction website that I'm going to have most of my media and my books available in short while. My book, Flux and Flow, will be available on all platforms, from Amazon to Barnes & Nobles to various other platforms. And you can always reach me on a special phone number that I've dedicated for inquiries. Predominantly is it's a number that I've dedicated. It's 424-644.
Wonderful.
Wonderful, Basil. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we look forward inviting you again and probably discuss new updates about the current situation.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.